Welcome back, everyone. So for this month, I'm getting a little bit behind on the actual video I was working on, but I know I didn't want to leave you guys completely in the dark this month, so I thought I'd do still a retrospective, but it's going to be done a little bit different. As you can tell by the title, it's a retrospective on World of Warcraft. I thought it might be cool or interesting to kind of go more in depth if you had listened to the Time Pals podcast where we talked about Warcraft, and I got a little bit into World of Warcraft and kind of some of the drama, some of the fun that I had while playing it, but I didn't get to go enough in detail. So this is kind of a video that's more in depth with that, at least as much as I can remember, but hopefully I can get more out there, especially for those who listened and wanted to hear more. So, well, we'll just jump straight into it. So World of Warcraft came out 19 years ago, so we're almost at that 20th anniversary, and I was 12 years old when the first World of Warcraft came out. Now, back then, I wasn't fully into, or at least fully understood, how role playing games work. As much as I understood that, you run around, you attack monsters, you level up, you get new abilities, and you're supposed to put points into skills, but that was probably my problem is I didn't fully understand. You have an idea for what kind of character you want to create, and then you want to spend those points wisely into abilities or skills that'll help your character out become better, either as a DPS or a healer, whatever it might be. I was just kind of like, oh, what can I do in this game? And my older brothers would tell me, oh, well, do you want to be like a mage? Do you want to be a warlock who summons creatures or casts, fire spells? Or do you want to be a warrior, paladin? Explaining all of it. And then I was more intrigued with the warlock at first, since I imagined the fantasy of having, demons to control. And I remember my brother telling me, like, oh, at later levels you can actually control your own Doom Guard or Infernal as a pet. And I thought that was super cool, so I did create a warlock, and like I said earlier, I didn't fully understand RPGs, so I didn't play for too long, especially since my attention span was probably pretty quick, and probably around that time I was just more into shooters on consoles. I think that as far as I went, Elder Scrolls was probably like the easiest way for me to understand, or at least I could kind of create, my own character, but I don't know if he was the most efficient. So yeah, again, when it came to World of Warcraft, I only played for a little bit and then just stopped playing. When Burning Crusade came out, I never touched it. I never went back to World of Warcraft. I completely skipped that expansion. But I did try to watch, I think, YouTube videos that were able to show, guilds fighting like Illidan, Kael'thas, Lady Vosh. Since I was a huge fan of Warcraft 3, I still wanted to know like what happens lore-wise, but never played Burning Crusade when it first came out. I haven't even touched, Burning Crusade Classic, so we're just gonna skip right into Wrath of the Lich King, which I also did not play when it had come out. It was still a matter of I didn't have a job, so I wasn't able to pay for the subscription myself. Beforehand, that was my brothers paid for that subscription and let me play, especially since I had to share the computer with two older brothers, and we would only get like 1 hour. And with MMORPGs, you know that it requires a lot of time playing it. Unfortunately, Wrath of the Lich King I also skipped, just like Burning Crusade. But I did eventually come back in later expansions to play through all the leveling areas in there, especially when I tried to get Lore Master achievement by doing every single quest in all the areas. But I guess we'll just jump right into Cataclysm, because this was the game that finally I had two friends who started playing WoW, and they were telling me like, oh, this is the time to finally start playing. They revamped the whole leveling system, so it's actually easier to get to max level, unlike in Wrath. I would probably say that was another reason I didn't want to jump in, because I'd have to level through Vanilla, through Burning Crusade, and then through Wrath. It would just like take forever. But with Cataclysm, it sounded like, no, they've revamped everything, they've made it more enjoyable. You're able to hop in and actually have a good time and get to max level at a reasonable time. And I finally had a job, so I actually had money to spend. It was also good because now that I had someone to play with, and we both created paladins, since I think we heard paladins were overpowered at the time, if they're not still overpowered. But yeah, my friend taught me a lot about how the game plays, the goals of quest. Don't worry about buying gear because the quest rewards will give you pieces of gear that is more than enough for you to stay at, certain gear levels. I still feel really bad for my friend Alex because I was getting so addicted to it. We always made a pact where when we got off from school, we'd come home, we'd start leveling together, and then if one of us had to log off for whatever reason, we'd both agree to stop playing. But eventually I was so addicted to it that I wanted to just keep leveling that character up. In hindsight, I definitely should have just, created a second character that's like my solo character. But nope, I did that. I was a jerk. And yeah, I got to max level and my poor friend Alex never did. So he eventually stopped playing and never hit max level. So I'm really sorry, Alex, if you're listening to this. I did keep playing. Eventually, when I understood, okay, now they hit max level, now what's left to do? Oh, dungeons. Because you gotta do dungeons before you can do raids. I wanted to get to do raids, they seemed really fun, but I needed better gear. So at that time, if you did normal dungeons, you got justice points. If you did heroic dungeons, you got valor points. And you got some justice points as well. But the whole point was you collect justice points, you go to a vendor and you get better PvE armor. And then once you get good enough, you can then do the heroic ones to get the valor points, and then the valor points get you even better PvE armor. So day after day I'd hop on, do a couple dungeons, and then hop off and probably go play Call of Duty at the time, or Halo. That was just kind of a routine for a while until eventually I just kind of realized, is this really it with World of Warcraft? That I'm just hopping on, just doing dungeons, and then just hop off. There really wasn't a whole lot else to do. I'm sure fans of the games are going to tell me, oh, well, you could have done this, you could have done, I don't know, these professions, you could have done PvP. When it came to MMORPGs, I was always scared to do PvP because I just imagined, oh, there's already people with best gear. I'm just going to get destroyed in PvP. And that's still kind of the case even today in WoW. So PvP is just something I don't really touch in MMOs. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much how Cataclysm went. Even when a major patch, what was it, Rise of the Zandalari, and then there was the Firelands major patch, I would come back for a month or two and try to do the same routine, but again, it grew stale. Cataclysm just kind of died off for me like that. Overall, it was still a great, fun experience, but you know how most of them say, oh, but max level is when the real fun begins? For me, it wasn't. It just felt like a job at that point. You hop on, you do the same stuff over and over again, and then you hop off. That's how I remember Cataclysm. And then we arrive at Miss Pandaria. Once again, really enjoyed the questing, going to each zone, doing the quests. I thought those were really well done. They did some scenarios thing, which was 3 players do a dungeon style thing. It was fun, not much to it. And then once I hit max level, I'm right back into, okay, so I just do these dungeons over and over again, which again, the dungeons are fun in and of themselves, but after you do them 50 times, they get stale. I'm pretty sure it was the same routine that you do the dungeons, the normal dungeons for justice points, and then the heroic ones for valor points. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my memory of I would just do those over and over and over again. Until I got, I believe, a high enough item level that I could do LFR, looking for raid, because I was like, oh, cool, I can actually just find a random group and actually hop into raids. I thought raids were something that that's the goal to get to. They're the most fun, which is still true to a degree. But I remember the first time hopping in, being a tank, and have no idea what I was doing. I'm I don't know how this boss fight goes. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I remember private messaging the off tank, being hey, do you know this fight? And he's like, no, this is my first time also. Yeah, that did not go over well. And I got yelled at by the group, and I'm just hey man, it's my first time, I'm just trying to learn the fight. And then they're like, oh, well, you should go onto YouTube and, look up the fights before you actually try. I'm sure that's a whole debate you could talk about where it's yeah, but, shouldn't part of the gaming experience be, hey, my first time trying this out? Does it really fall on every player in the game that before you jump into raids, you have to go onto YouTube and you have to watch other people's first attempts at the raid and let them tell you, oh, this is how the fight goes, guys. You got to watch out for these abilities. Tanks do this, DPS do this. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into that. But once again, it was the same thing, just like in Cataclysm, that once I just kind of got bored of it, I just would stop playing. Whenever there was a new major patch that would come out, I would hop back in for about a month or two, and again, just do the same routine, and it would get stale, and that would be it. I wouldn't come back to it. But Siege of Orgrimmar sounded great. Like, oh man, we get to siege Orgrimmar. That sounds awesome. But again, didn't get up to a high enough item level before I just grew bored of the game, before I even got to do the raid itself. And then just waited for the next expansion, which was Warlords of Draenor, and this one sounded a little more promising. But this is where you shouldn't trust whenever, the game developers come out and say, this is what you get to do in the game, this is what you get to do in the game. They definitely make things sound a lot more fun or interesting than it actually is going to be. Kind of like fast food commercials. They make those burgers look big, juicy, delicious, fresh. And then when you actually go there, it just looks like it was, half put together with old meat and bun, yellow lettuce, and, didn't come out the way you expected it to be. But I still remember Warlords, again, as a similar experience. Same kind of thing. Did as many dungeons as I could before I just grew bored of the game. And then I just once again stopped playing. It just seemed like WoW was a game to just hop on, play for a couple months, and then stop playing. Mainly just because, I don't want to pay another $15 to do the same thing that I've been doing for the past month. I know that can open up a whole nother discussion. It's like, whoa, you play video games to do the same thing over and over and over again. But when it comes to WoW, it definitely helps if you have friends to play with. So I always encourage people, join a guild, meet some people, and they kind of become the reason you hop on to play with. So as Legion was approaching, I had met a friend who lived in the UK, and he decided to get back into WoW. Unfortunately for me, I had to get a separate World of Warcraft account for EU. If you didn't know, there's US and then there's EU. I don't know if other regions are also separate, but yeah, essentially I had to buy World of Warcraft twice and all its expansions in order to play with them in the EU. And I do remember there was maybe a second and a half delay. If I moved, it would take, okay, maybe more like half a second. I could notice when I'd activate abilities, it would take half a second for it to register, so I always had to be half a second ahead of everything. But I still had a good time leading up to Legion, where he really informed me, this is how you're supposed to play World of Warcraft. Here are add-ons you need in order to play in these raids, and this is where I really got to experience raids at the end of Warlords of Draenor. And then when Legion came out, the guild that we were part of had a bunch of Danish people in it who, I can't remember any names unfortunately, but I do remember at the time they were hilarious to play with. We're all, playing Legion. I love the new World Quest system, which is basically dailies, but you don't have to go find the quest giver, then go out, do the quest, and then come back to collect your reward. World quests were just a simpler way of you just go to the area, complete it, it automatically gives you the rewards. I overall just really liked the role-playing aspect, or at least the fantasy of the Legion has returned again for a third time, and we need to hold them off. I thought that was just overall a great fantasy to kind of experience with a character. Also around this time I thought, okay, now I'm actually with a guild, I get to be a part of a raid group, I can't wait to, learn the mechanics of how to work as a team in an MMORPG setting, and at first things are going pretty good. At this point, I guess I should say, what character was I playing? Well, I'm sure to no surprise, with Legion coming out, I wanted to try the new class, the Demon Hunter, which was a really fun class in terms of its mobility, just its fantasy of, hunting demons. That was what I played at that time, and things were going really well. I did really like the Emerald Nightmare raid, so for me, I was like, this is awesome, this is great. But all good things must come to an end, because this is where the drama starts. So in this guild, they had this rule that if you got a legendary that week, you couldn't, or you were exempt, however you want to put it, from getting any raid loot that week. It was just, it's a stupid rule, but it's I understood, okay, if you guys didn't know, in Legion, that was how you got legendaries, it was just a random event that would just happen where you would just get a legendary from a pickup, and it could be any mob. So when that finally happened to me, and we went to raid. At first I was like okay because I was like, I probably won't get anything good that week. Nothing I need will probably drop or someone else will probably get it. So I wasn't too worried, but you can kind of see where this is going. So I'm pretty sure it was the first boss of Emerald Nightmare, and she finally dropped, I think it was the shoulders for the Demon Hunter. But there was only one other person in the group that could use it. But lucky for me, the person already had it or had something better, so they didn't need it. Now for me, it was an upgrade. And I'm sure to no surprise, it's like, well, obviously I should get it next since I'm the only other person in this raid group that should get it. They told me no. They said you already got a legendary, so you can't have it. I understand it should be more for other people will get loot this week, so that way as a group we're getting stronger. But since so-and-so doesn't need it because they already have something better, and it's an upgrade for me, it's a piece of gear I've been waiting for the past couple of weeks that we've done this raid, so finally, so can't you just make this one exception and let me have the piece of gear? And they said, no, we're just going to disenchant it so we can make enchants, and that's going to also improve the group. Well, what's the point of us doing raids if the whole point is for us to get gear, but you guys aren't giving me the gear when it drops, mind you, but you guys tell me it's more important that you take the gear, you disenchant it, so you can use that enchant to empower your gear. They then decide to call me selfish, saying this is for the good of the group. And I'm the one being selfish for wanting the gear that should go to me, and it's the whole point of why we're doing these raids. And they had the gall to call me selfish. And right there is when I just quit the guild and left. I was just like, screw them. Clearly, they don't care about me, my progression, even though ironically they say, oh, this is for the good of the group. Everyone needs to get better. And I think priority is get everybody the gear, upgraded gear, and then enchants are just that small little bonus to push us up that little bit. So I think they kind of had it backwards. Or you guys should kind of see that it's really just them being selfish because it's all about getting them the best gear and then get them the enchants that they need to improve that gear first. Only then will they give out gear to the rest of us and then maybe the enchants as well. That was my takeaway from it. And yeah, that's when I just kept playing WoW by myself, didn't have a guild, and just kept doing world quests and dungeons. That was when they introduced the Mythic Keystones, but I had no idea how Mythic Keystones work, so I was just doing heroic dungeons over and over and over and over again. Yeah, that's when things once again became a repeat of every other expansion I played, just doing dungeons over and over again, and it wasn't fun anymore. And so I just stopped playing, and I thought, what a shame. I thought things were going to be great, and fortunately wasn't friends anymore until I think it was when the next major patch was coming out for the Tomb of Sargeras one. Because I did want to come back and do Nighthold, but since I didn't have a guild, to me that just didn't seem like there was a point. But after many months passed and Tomb of Sargeras raid was coming out, I thought, I'm going to give it another try. So I came back when the Broken Shore was a new area to explore and, do quests in to get ready for the Tomb of Sargeras raid. I did reach out to my friend again, asked if I could come back to the guild, and he said sure. And of course, when I came back, it was like just him and like 2 other people. It seemed like everything fell apart after I left. Because, again, when you have people like that are thinking you're the selfish one, but they don't seem to see it, it's just not going to work out in the end. So, didn't get to do Nighthold, didn't get to do Tomb of Sargeras raids, just played it until, once again, just did heroic dungeons until I got bored. I did, however, do that Mage Tower, but that was incredibly difficult, and I thought that was impossible to do unless you had really good gear, which I did not, so here we are again, I stopped playing. Then, when the final major patch came out, no, hang on, this is where things get weird. So this is when I thought I was done with WoW and I wasn't going to be playing it ever again. Now, this is where I go on a little tangent. Around this time was when PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds was really popular. I think it was our very first, or at least with me, my very first PUBG match. And I play with my friend Alex, from who I mentioned earlier from Cataclysm, and our friend Luke. We hopped in to a game and we accidentally got paired up with a random person. This random player was called Escaped Reality, and I remember at first we're just like, oh, look at this noob. He jumped out of the airplane really early, and we landed on the opposite side of the map. Long story short, eventually as the circle closed in and we saw our fourth buddy, or random, was still alive, and we eventually made contact with him, and it turned out this guy was actually really cool. And we didn't win the match, but we did have a fun match, and I remember just sending him a friend invite, just said hey, if you're ever on, just reach out, we could play another game together and things are going to be cool. A couple weeks went by and I can't remember, he reached out to me or I reached out to him, and we hopped into another squad, and this is where I met a guy named Dorkosaurus, who is also a streamer, and we played a lot of PUBG together. I got to play while he was streaming. It was a lot of great times, but he also streamed World of Warcraft. And when I saw that he was in a guild, and I was like, hey, Dorkosaurus, I was thinking about coming back to World of Warcraft. Would you be okay with inviting me to the guild so I at least, can get to meet some people and maybe get to enjoy it? And this was around the end of Legion, and Battle for Azeroth was going to be coming out in a couple months. So I was able to start playing again. Now, keep in mind, this is now back on the US servers. So I had to rebuy all the expansions, including Legion, again for the US servers. And this is where I didn't really have any, or at least my characters were Warlords of Draenor levels. So I think at this point, this is when buying Legion, I believe, boosted a character. And so I boosted a Death Knight so I could start playing again. And this is where BFA was coming out. I think I got another boost and I used it Warrior, which is Warmar, the character you're seeing on screen. And this is where I got to experience Mythic Keystones. This is where they explained to me how they work, and at the end of the week you get a really powerful piece of gear, and this is where they were able to help me, and I got to do a lot of different things. For one, the Mage Tower, because once BFA came out, you weren't able to get those artifact skins from the Mage Tower. I remember my Death Knight was really high level because I was mostly playing him, and I was able to beat Lord Cruel after probably 50 attempts. We all remember Lord Cruel, I'm sure. And then eventually I did play on my warrior and was able to beat him as well. This is where I can't remember what the guild's name was. But this guild, I remember it came down to Argus on Heroic. We were trying to get ahead of the curve. And I remember it was literally the last week in order to beat him to get AOTC. And the second to last day that we joined the group, and I could tell the group was struggling on Agrimar, and they finally were able to do it. We get to Argus. We tried, I think, a couple times just to get a feel for him, and then they were Monday wasn't normally a raiding day for them, but they said, we're going to come back, or at least they hope everyone comes back, and we're going to try and beat Argus for the literal last day. And it was pretty incredible trying him over and over and over and over again. But eventually the guild was able to beat Argus and get AOTC. And to me, that was the best feeling. I remember shortly after, there was a pop-up that said a guild on the server was able to beat Argus on Mythic, which really goes to show just how difficult Argus was for, I think, a lot of people, especially for Mythic difficulty. Beating Argus was incredibly difficult. But at least for me, I was fine with getting ahead of the curve. And that was kind of the start of every major patch that comes out, whatever new raid comes out, that's going to be my goal, is being a part of a guild that tries to get AOTC. Now we finally get to BFA. My overall experience with BFA was still fun. Since Legion overall was a fun experience, it was something new compared to the other expansions of WoW. There was finally a bunch of different stuff to do, and that's why for me, I'm probably in the minority. BFA was a good expansion. I'm gonna say it. It was a good expansion in terms of there was always something you could be doing. Usually I would hop on, do the dailies, and then work on the weeklies for a little bit, for a few hours or something, collect whatever I needed to do, to work towards that. And if you all remember, there was island expeditions, war fronts, then there was doing your mythic keystone, preparing, if you were going to do raids, you would prepare for it by if you needed to get potions ready. A lot of the time I would just hop on and just chat with everyone while I do my world quests, or I would just collect herbs everywhere. For me, BFA was really the time that I would just spend my entire day just playing. At least for me, I had a great time when it came to BFA. And when the first raid came out, I remember Gahoon was a tough raid to get through, but it was, especially during progression each week, you could slowly see, like, we're slowly getting better, we're dealing more damage, we're getting that boss fight closer and closer. If we can work out those mechanics a little bit better, we can certainly get through this. And then we had a Mythic Keystone night where everyone would hop on and try to, help each other out, get as high of a key as we all could. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't able to make it to those Mythic Keystone nights because I think my schedule was Tuesday through Saturday. I'm trying to remember. I would always arrive late to raid nights, so I would at least get to be part of it, but not at least not at the start. If I was lucky, I would catch like the end of it. But when it came to Mythic Keystone nights, I wasn't able to. And the only times I could do it was on Sundays and Mondays, which was probably the worst time to do it because everyone had already gotten their keys done and there was nobody else looking. But that was probably the worst part about the guild is it's like, guys, I just need help getting just a key in. I don't need a high key, I just need to complete a keystone. That's all I'm asking. Most of them still wouldn't do it. They're like, oh, I did, like 10 keys on Tuesday and Wednesday. It's like, it's Monday. Can't you just help me get one in? And this is where the next problem came from this guild. I'm not saying there was like elitists or something, but the problem was when we got to Battle for Dazara Lord, we got through it on normal. But when we got to Heroic, that's when the problem started to arise, and I know I should have spoken up about it more, but it was like the second boss, which was this gorilla, that it's generally an easy fight, so long as everyone knows the fight, knows what they need to do, but also I'm pretty sure it was a DPS check, and that was starting to get on people's nerves, that we run this for like the third week, and we still can't get past him, because numbers-wise, most people weren't improving. The ones who were doing the Mythic Keystones were kind of their own click group. And so they're getting mad at us because we're not improving, we're not doing our keystone. And this is where I should have spoken up saying like, hey, there's a bunch of us that try to get our keystones in, but when we ask, can we get some help and at least get a keystone in? Keep in mind, this is before the vault system that Blizzard introduced in Shadowlands. If you did 1, if you did 4, and then if you did 8, you then got multiple choices. This was before that. So you just needed to do one keystone, and whatever was the highest you did for that week is the rewards you would get. So again, we're not asking for much. We just need help getting one keystone in, so we at least will get a decent piece of gear each week. But they wouldn't do that. Instead, they spent all their time complaining that we're not doing our keystones, we're not improving, and we're the problem, versus they're, here we go, being selfish for themselves and their friends. And I remember asking like for help, and they just said, why don't you just pug it? And I said I would try, and nobody would join. I remember even calling someone out saying like, do you guys have a problem with me? And they said, I'm trying to remember how he worded it. It was like, only if you think you have a problem. It was like a weird answer where it's like, or at least they're not actively having a problem with me, but they're certainly not trying to help me. In terms of the guild, it's like, if we're all trying to achieve the same thing, shouldn't you be more active in trying to help the guild so we can all achieve that? But they don't seem to see that. And I just remember one day our guild leader, I'm pretty sure he had personal issues going on, that he left the guild, and pretty quickly the guild all fell apart. Everyone went their separate ways. So to no surprise, this is where I stopped playing WoW again for a number of months. I think I started playing again. Last major patch came out with, I believe it's N'Zoth, and I was about to stop playing, but that was when one of my friends from the previous guild, I asked saying like, hey, are you guys a part of another guild or something? And they said, oh yeah, we are. And so I hopped in with that guild, which is Disturbed. I do have a video on it when we finally were able to beat N'Zoth on the heroic difficulty to get AOTC. I should say, I don't recommend watching the video because you're just going to hear me spamming my keyboard before I actually had a decent microphone that wouldn't pick up that kind of stuff. But it was pretty fun. It reminded me of the earlier days of raiding, especially with like the Argus. Getting AOTC, there's just something about that culmination of that hard work, doing the mythic keys to get, the best gear each week until you're, top of the DPS charts. Well, from there, it was just looking forward to the next expansion, Shadowlands. Here we are. When it came to Shadowlands, super ready for, all right, everyone, getting your characters, as high of an eye level as you can by the time of the raid that would come out. And I remember I was going to be like on top of it. I'm like, I am going to be one of the best DPSs we have in this guild. So I did my research where it's like the first week, do the mythics so that way you can get at least, 2 pieces of mythic gear. And eventually when, Castle Nathria came out, I was like up there with our top DPSers. I do also have a video on that with the guild Disturbed, but that video is only for normal difficulty. We did try a little bit of heroic. Can't remember how far. It's one of those things. I don't think we made it very far. We only made it to, I think, the second boss, and I can't remember what happened exactly. People just stopped playing either because they weren't having fun or the commitment just was too much for a lot of people, and things just, the guild was still there, but of course not many people were on. I do remember some people were like leaving as time went on, and we tried to merge with like another guild, but some people didn't really like that guild. So basically I just remember our guild leader stopped. I know he had some depression that he was going through. I do hope he's doing well. So EOS, if you're watching, I hope things are going really well for you. So now we get to the first major patch. I can't remember what it was called, of Shadowlands. And that one was probably the highlight. Thinking back on Shadowlands, it was again the same experience I was having with Legion and BFA, that it was really good with solo content. There was always stuff you could be doing. Same kind of thing with Profession. There was always World Quest to do. There was always Torghast to do. There wasn't as much to do as in BFA. And I know that was the main complaint, is it just felt like a checklist. Like, okay, do your island expeditions, do your keystone for the week, do your warfront, a checklist kind of thing. Shadowlands was trying to kind of address that a little bit, have it, less to do. But I still really did enjoy Shadowlands, that first major patch. I played so much Mythic Keystones. Once I had like found out like, oh, there is actually like an achievement to aim for, which is the Mythic Keystone Master, where you do all of them until you get your rating high enough, and eventually you get an achievement and you get a unique mount. And so week after week I would hop on. I would do, at that time I think it was, if you did 1 dungeon, you got 1 vault. 5 dungeons, it would then take the lowest of those 5, and that would be your keystone for that vault slot. And then the third one, I believe, was 10 at that time. So I was doing a lot of Mythic Keystones, and I was trying my absolute best to grind it out as much as I could. And eventually I got my item level really high. I just can't remember what it was at that time, but just think, I kept doing so many 20s each week that I was able to get that item level reward, which was the highest for most of my slots except for like 2 or 3 of them or something. So I was getting like instantly invited to other Keystone 20s. Or is Keystone 15s or Keystone 20s? I can't remember. Or maybe even 10s. I can't remember if it was 10, 15, 20. Blizzard always seems to change it. So once I had Keystone Master, I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do? I was still part of the Disturbed guild, and there was usually like 2, maybe 3 people that would come online, so we did not have a raid group at all. So I started thinking, like, you know what? I'm going to just join random raid groups and see if I can get ahead of the curve. And many weeks went by, and I would just join random groups because my item level was super high, so I was always on the top of those DPS charts. and eventually beat it on normal, so I at least understood each of the fights. And then I would try to look up YouTube videos on how the heroic fights go, so when I would join a pug group, it was still really hard because by that point most of the groups would say AOTC, heroic run, meaning you already had to have AOTC before you could even join the group, which I really hope Blizzard could kind of fix that because it seems really unfortunate, but there's just not much you can do. If that's what the group leader wants, there's really not much you can really do about it. So I just kept on trying and eventually find a group, and we just happened to go through it and eventually beat Sylvanas, and I've got AOTC Sylvanas. To me, that's when it felt like, okay, I accomplished everything I set out to do. Sure, I could have done PvP, and that was when I first did try PvP, which was fun, but yeah, PvP is tough. It's stressful, especially when you're trying to go for that elite set. It doesn't really become fun at that point because you're trying so hard, and if your group isn't, on it 100%, then it's like, why even keep trying? So I stopped playing until the next major patch came out, or I should say the final patch came out for Shadowlands, and I once again joined, and I first set out do those mythic keystones every week. By this point they lowered it that you just needed 1, 4, and 8, so that made it a lot easier. But that was my goal, was every week I made sure to do the best keystones that I could, and from there I got my Season 3 Keystone Master achievement, and I got the special mount for it as well. I did try to do the Sepulchre, however you say it. I did beat it on normal, but I wasn't able to do it on heroic. I can't remember if around that time I was trying to get away from WoW, but also I do remember it was just becoming so difficult. Literally, I remember spending at least 2 or 3 hours looking for a heroic raid group to join, and at one point I found a group, but it already fell apart on the first boss and everybody quit, and I just felt so demoralized, why am I wasting so much of my time and really my life trying to get this just one achievement, and it's just not working out, and so I stopped playing. And then we finally get to the current WoW expansion, Dragonflight, which from the beginning I was not really looking forward to it, or I didn't really care because I just felt the whole dragon thing was kind of like when Mists of Pandaria was coming out. People kind of felt that was Blizzard ride the wave of Kung Fu Panda. I guess everybody loves pandas. So for Dragonflight, I can only think of a handful of movies and shows that were coming out that had dragons in it. House of the Dragon. I think Shazam had a dragon in it, so it just seemed like dragons were the thing in pop culture, so they thought, oh, let's make our next expansion about dragons with Dragonflight. But the one thing I heard from Dragonflight that they were changing was professions, because again, from really BFA and Shadowlands, I really enjoyed just the simplicity of I can go out there and each zone had its own herbs to collect, had its own fish and collect, and then I could make the potions I needed for dungeons and raid. But when it came to Dragonflight, they now overcomplicated it, and now I just don't understand it. It's not fun to do. Please revert that change, Blizzard, if you guys ever hear this. Please revert it back to that simplistic nature of go to these zones, collect the herbs, collect enough of them, boom, you can make a potion. For Dragonflight, I didn't stick around too long. It just always seems to come back. The lesson in all of this, kind of my conclusion to World of Warcraft, is play it with friends. That's the best way to enjoy it. At this current moment with Season 3, I did find a random guild, and so far I'm having a good time because we're mainly focusing on keystones. So usually when I'm able to hop on, they usually ask me hey, Warmar, do you want to help us, do some keys? And I usually say yes. I go, I don't care what it is. I'll just be happy to help and push someone's key. I'm still able to just pug group with random people in order to get the highest keys that I'm able to do because of my item level and my rating. But then, on Sundays and Mondays that we call cleanup nights, that's when I come in and just help them out, try to push, someone's key to as high as they can. So at the very least, for that week, they're gonna at least get a really good piece of gear, because so far the group is helping me as well when I really need them. So far, Season 3 of Dragonflight has been pretty fun, and at least at the time of recording, I do still hop on, especially the job that I have, at least allows me in my free time to just kind of hop on. I'm still trying to learn how these herbs work, but really I just spend my time just farming gold while I'm at work, because at times I just have to hop up and go do something. So at least with gold farming, I can just stop at any time, and that's going to help out my character. And that's pretty much where I'm at right now with World of Warcraft. So in conclusion, I mean, World of Warcraft is still a fun game, but I do feel like its main strengths, and to a degree, the requirement to really enjoy it, is to play it with friends, or at the very least, join a guild and try to make friends as best you can. And if it's not a very active guild, or if the others in the guild aren't really reaching out to you and talking to you and trying to make you enjoy World of Warcraft to its fullest, then find another guild, honestly. It's still hard to recommend because, as I've talked about before, the fun is at max level, so getting there can be a struggle. If you're just starting out, I kind of feel sorry for you. I hope you're able to play with some friends that can kind of help power level you through it. I do think it needs some kind of revamp in terms of its leveling system, but for now, World of Warcraft is still a great game, and I do have fond memories of it, as I've talked about. So honestly, my final thoughts with World of Warcraft is it's still a great game. Blizzard still makes a fun game, and as much as people, on YouTube that make these clickbaity videos that say World of Warcraft is, reaching the end of its life cycle, and it's not fun anymore, especially Bellular Gaming, or sorry, Bellular Warcraft. I always feel like he talks so negative about WoW, even though it's like, look, people are still playing it. It is still a fun game to do. There's still plenty to enjoy here. And it's really just up to players to find that fun, to find a guild so they can enjoy the game with other people. But at the end of the day, even with its negatives, its shortcomings, people that hate certain things about the game, there's still no denying that World of Warcraft is still a great game to play, even to this day. So I hope you guys did enjoy this very different kind of retrospective video, especially for a MMORPG. And yeah, I hope you guys will tune in next month for my next video. Certainly check out my other videos, my other retrospectives, my Rising from Iron series. Also check me out on Spotify, as I mentioned, with the Time Pals podcast. I also just started an Etsy store. I've just got a couple products on there, and I'm looking to add some more, so definitely check it out if you want to support the channel. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.